Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today as we'll discuss an exciting new funding opportunity co-sponsored by FAR and USDA. We'll wait a little bit of time to let folks get into the room, but we'll start within a minute or two. Ah, this is exciting. We see a lot of people coming into the room, which means there's a lot of interest about this. So I'm excited to talk. All right. Well, we'll give everybody one more minute to get into the room and then we'll get started. All right. In the interest of time, as additional folks filter in, this is also being recorded. So when you have an opportunity, if there's some folks that you know that couldn't make this webinar, please be aware that we are recording this for the purpose of sharing quite broadly. But I want to welcome you to this webinar to discuss a new funding opportunity titled Nourishing Next Generation Agri-Food Breakthroughs Innovation Challenge. And I think we can progress to the next slide, please, Lauren. So I'll be one of the folks that will share information with you today. Each of my colleagues will have the opportunity to introduce themselves, but we will talk a little bit about, in our time together, the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research, for those of you who may be a little less familiar with our organization. And then we'll share a little bit about the USDA and their interest in innovation, their exciting new research strategy, as well as FAR's exciting new research strategy, and how we came to want to work in this collaborative way. And then we will provide a little bit of information on what we think about around the need for this high risk, high reward innovation in the agri-food space. Then we will provide an overview of the research approach and program structure of the RFA, and then we'll end with questions and answer period from the attendees. Next slide. You'll note that during the first part of the dialogue, only the participants, you'll all be muted, but you can and should, and we welcome you to include questions in the chat or Q&A at that time. We'll be monitoring the Q&A throughout the whole webinar, and then at the end, we will highlight questions and then have a chance to go back and forth and answer questions for clarity. We will definitely reserve time at the end of this presentation. The goal of the presentation is not only to make you aware of the funding opportunity, but also to answer any questions as folks are deciding whether or not this might be a good opportunity for them to apply to. And as I mentioned earlier, we will record and share the webinar. So if you registered or anyone couldn't make it and they registered, they will receive the recording via email, and the recording will also be available on our website for your reference. So even if you don't take all the notes that you think you wanted to in this opportunity, it will be recorded and you can go back and reference it later. All right, so it looks like we have a good number of folks in the room, so I'm happy to introduce myself and talk more about the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research. So I'm Dr. Lakeisha Odom. I'm a scientific program director at the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research. I sit under our priority area of sustaining vibrant agroecosystems. I also manage our workforce development. For those less familiar with FAR, we are an organization that builds unique public-private partnerships. We connect funders, researchers, farmers, and the goal of this is to provide every person access to affordable, nutritious food grown on thriving farms. We are a 501c3. We were created in the 2014 Farm Bill, and the goal of this was to access the private sector investment and bridge that with public sector investment. We also want to fill knowledge gaps and complement USDA's research agenda. Since our creation in 2014, we have awarded over 360 grants, matched and funded $750 million, and we have approximately 550 distinct funding partners. As I mentioned, this year, FAR went through a research strategy refresh where we looked across all of the work that we engaged in and really wanted to elevate and encourage more cross-disciplinary work. And so we have 4 key priority areas. They are cultivating thriving production systems, and that includes our animal system and crop production work, bolstering healthy food systems, which includes our Health Ag Nexus and our urban food systems work, sustaining vibrant agroecosystems, which is the portfolio on which I sit, which looks at soil health, sustaining water management, and our climate portfolio work sits in that body. And then the last area is sustaining workforce, the scientific workforce. As a huge part of our research strategy, we also have a innovation focus, which has always been central to FAR's mission. But as I mentioned, when we launched our research strategy, we really wanted to focus in on innovative food and agricultural solutions. And this funding opportunity does embody FAR's mission. As you'll get to know part of the components of the RFA, you'll note that we are heavily focused on early career researchers, which is a part of our sustaining scientific workforce, and then the topic areas that will be described later by our colleague Jody. You'll see a lot of our priority area and our priorities popping up throughout there. So now I'll transition to my colleague John at USDA to introduce himself and then discuss a bit more about USDA and their role in this.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Odom. It's a pleasure to be here with everyone today. Thank you for taking time to tune into this webinar. My name is John Roethlisberger. I am a special advisor with the Office of the Chief Scientist of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, or USDA, of course. And USDA is just so pleased to have this opportunity to partner with the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research on the Nourishing Next Generation Agri-Food Breakthroughs Innovation Challenge. Secretary of Agriculture Tom Vilsack announced this first of its kind funding opportunity earlier this week at the Agri-Food Innovation Symposium. And let me just take a moment again to reiterate what wonderful partners FAR have been on this. I cannot overstate how important their commitment, their drive, their passion for agri-food innovation has been in advancing this effort. We would not be here today without them. So thank you, FAR. The Innovation Challenge is made possible through funds that Congress appropriated to the Office of the Chief Scientist within USDA. And as Dr. Odom stated, the purpose of the Innovation Challenge is to encourage and support high-risk, high-reward research to advance nutrition security, increase equity, and promote science-based, climate-smart, sustainable agriculture that nourishes Americans and helps feed others throughout the world. By way of just a little bit of background about USDA, it was established as a department in 1862 by President Abraham Lincoln, and we have been fostering innovation ever since. There are nearly 100,000 employees of USDA stationed at more than 4,500 locations across the country and abroad. Of course, most of USDA employees are within the United States. There is probably a USDA location near you, and you may in fact be sitting in a USDA location today. So welcome to all of our USDA colleagues. The work of USDA is to provide leadership and service related to food, agriculture, natural resources, rural development, and related issues in the US, and again, to be a leader globally in these areas as well. One of 8 USDA mission areas, the Research, Education, Economics, or REE mission area, is where most of the science and data-focused agencies sit within the department. And these agencies, you see them listed here: Agricultural Research Service, Economic Research Service, National Agricultural Statistics Service, and National Institute of Food and Agriculture, as well as the Office of the Chief Scientist, conduct research in-house and through partnerships such as this one to foster thriving U.S. food and fiber systems. Just over 1 year ago, in May 2023, USDA published our latest science and research strategy. And the strategy outlines our highest research priorities over the next years. It aims to spur innovation and collaboration through partnerships inspired by and organized around these priorities. The priorities, which you can see on your screen, are accelerating innovative technologies and practices, driving climate-smart solutions, bolstering nutrition security and health, cultivating resilient ecosystems, and translating research into action. You can read the strategy and learn more about USDA science at the web link you see there, usda.gov/USDA-science. The concept and the themes of the request for applications that we are here to discuss today are truly rooted in the USDA science and research strategy, as well as FAR's priority research areas that Dr. Odom discussed. And these will be valuable resources to you as you prepare your proposals and identify ways to incorporate the themes that are part of this funding opportunity. We can move to the next slide, and we'll talk about the overarching goal of this funding opportunity, which is to launch innovative projects that will lead to major breakthroughs for food security and nutrition security in the United States. Just to quickly provide some definitions to level set here, food security is when people have ready access to nutritionally adequate and safe foods and can acquire those foods in socially acceptable ways. Food security is, of course, an essential precursor to nutrition security. When we talk about nutrition security here, we mean consistent access and availability, as well as affordability of foods that promote well-being, prevent disease, and in some cases, even treat disease. In particular, we're thinking here about diet-related chronic diseases. So the challenges that we face today to achieve nutrition security, they are complex, they're overlapping, and they're global. They need to be addressed with a common lens, seen through a common lens and addressed in an interconnected way. These solutions must simultaneously address climate, human health and dietary needs, and social equity. It's clear that innovative thinking and innovative actions are essential to making a better future for all of us to live in. And that's really what this request for applications is all about. Investments in agri-food science also make sense economically. There are $20 in economic benefits for every dollar spent, every dollar invested in agri-food science and research. So recognizing this and consistent with the USDA science and research strategy, USDA cultivates many partnerships to foster innovation. And there's just a few examples listed here on the slide. I'll mention each of them briefly. I encourage everyone to look at them more in depth as they'll provide some ideas and inspiration and potentially new connections as you think about your proposals. So AIM for Climate, AIM stands for Agriculture Innovation Mission, and that's an international effort to address climate change and global hunger through agriculture innovation. Ascend for Better Health is the agricultural science center of excellence for nutrition and diet, Ascend for Better Health, which brings together scientists, partner organizations, and communities to advance food and nutrition security. And then the last one I'll mention here is the USDA Next Gen program, which is enabling partner academic institutions to engage, recruit, retain, train, and support students at unprecedented scales in order to build the next generation of food and agriculture leaders. So as I said, you can find out more about these and other innovative USDA partnerships on our website, and I encourage everyone to check them out. Like these partnerships, this funding opportunity will prioritize support for interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary teams to pursue transformative projects that have the potential to change the game for food and agriculture. That high reward component of high risk, high reward. So we'll transition now to look a little more closely at the details and requirements for this particular request for applications. To be considered for funding, your proposal must integrate and simultaneously address the three themes listed here. These should look and sound familiar. They tier directly to several of the USDA science and research strategy priorities. So first, bolstering food and nutrition security and human health, including, for example, through innovations in nutritious foods and nutrition-related technologies. The second theme that needs to be interwoven into your project is driving climate-smart solutions with the goal of mitigating and adapting to the effects of climate change on nutrition security. Possible areas of interest are listed here. These are just examples. They're not meant to be inclusive. Some of these examples include drought-resistant crops, climate-informed decision support systems, and efforts to prevent and reduce food loss and waste. Many other ways to think about incorporating climate-smart solutions, just a few there. And then thirdly, a critical and essential theme in any projects proposed for this, any successfully projects proposed for this opportunity will be advancing social justice, equity, and opportunity with the goal of overcoming systemic inequalities through innovative tools, educational platforms, and data technologies that support underserved communities which are disproportionately affected by these inequities. Successful projects will innovate on topics related to equitable access, availability, and affordability of nutritious foods. So in short, we're looking for the most innovative, the most disruptive, the most transformative projects that will produce breakthroughs in food and nutrition security at the intersection of these three themes. So these issues, these themes are interconnected in reality. And what we're recognizing here in this funding opportunity is that they will be most fruitfully addressed through intentionally seeking to work on them simultaneously in a way that reflects that reality of their interconnection. This is really easy to represent visually. The most competitive projects will be those that sit within that yellow triangle of the Venn diagram that you see here. So now I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Dr. Jody Williams, and she'll introduce herself and give some examples of possible topics that sit within this intersecting space. Thank you, Jody.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Lakeisha, for getting us warmed up and providing an excellent overview and highlighting the overall themes of the program. So I'm Jody Williams. I'm a national program leader in food safety at USDA's National Institute of Food and Agriculture, and I am so excited to share additional information on this program and also to really be involved in this truly collaborative opportunity. So I'm going to provide a little more context around those themes just provided by John by giving some examples of areas of interest and then really discuss how the program is structured. So I'm going to get down in the weeds. So we're looking for projects that really optimize nutrition security from that food production and distribution systems with net positive impacts on climate while increasing equitable and sustainable access to safe, affordable, and nutritious food. Another area of interest is unconventional or novel food sources that are palatable, have high nutrient content, are affordable and accessible, and are also resistant to climate change. Projects that look to stabilize access to nutrient-rich foods in all communities during extreme weather events and other societal disruptors are also being solicited. These projects should be sure to take into account socioeconomic factors such as poverty, inequality, and poor nutrition and health outcomes. One final example is really using access to real-time data for consumers, producers, processors, and food supply chain systems to optimize nutrition security. This real-time data will allow the end users to address deficiencies that exist across the agricultural enterprise, including precision ag, livestock monitoring, supply chain transparency and reporting, consumer health tracking, precision nutrition, food waste and reduction, climate adaptation, and labor efficiency, just to name a few. And so what I tried to do was really kind of highlight some opportunities to talk about that intersection that John just described, but these are by no means all of the areas. This is just to kind of get your juices flowing on some ideas and topics of interest. Next slide, please. So now kind of switching gears and moving into program structure. So award amounts range from $350,000 to $500,000 and will cover up to 2 years or 24 months of funding. So in addition to the funds, the awardees will also have the opportunity to engage with USDA and FAR scientists and leaders. In order to be successful in this program, the projects must simultaneously integrate the 3 research topics discussed, so that food and nutrition security and human health component, climate smart solutions, and advancing social justice, equity, and opportunity. You must kind of be at the nexus of all 3 of those research topics in order to be successful. Preferences will be given to projects that contribute to 1 or more of the following goals. So projects that deploy or develop innovative solutions to prevent, prepare, and protect against intentional and unintentional threats to U.S. agriculture. Projects that overcome barriers in the development of agricultural technologies, research tools, and products that enhance export competitiveness, environmental sustainability, and resilience to extreme weather events, or projects that ensure that the U.S. maintains and enhances its position as a leader in developing and deploying agricultural technologies, research tools, and qualified projects and products that increase economic opportunities and security for farmers, ranchers, and rural communities. Projects that accelerate disruptive innovation that are aligned with USDA's science and research strategy and are consistent with the Foundation for Food and Ag's priority areas are also necessary. So now I'm going to hand it back over to Lakeisha to provide some more details on the programmatic structure.
Thanks so much, Jody. So first, I would say, please keep the questions in the Q&A coming. We are monitoring the chat. We are monitoring the Q&A. And so at the end, we will be answering those. So if I'm not responding in the moment, it's only because I know that we're going to use some of those questions at the end so that everyone can have the same question answered. So the first thing I'd like to talk about a little bit more is our eligibility requirements. For those folks that might be a bit more familiar with FAR, we have quite a wide eligibility range, so we can welcome domestic and international higher education institutions. We can work with nonprofit and for-profit organizations, government-affiliated research agencies. So USDA ARS researchers have often applied and been successful in receiving funds from a FAR-funded project. And as this is in collaboration with FAR, we can have that, those applicants are eligible as well. The other thing that I would highlight is if you have received a prior grant from FAR, that does not negate you from applying to this opportunity. So there's no barrier for that. As Jody so eloquently emphasized, the applications need to be at that nexus of nutrition and human health, climate smart ags, and then social equity, justice, and opportunity. For a greater detail or description of what is meant by that, both in this slide deck that will be shared and the RFA, you will find a link to the research strategy if you just want to read in greater detail about both FAR's priority areas, but also USDA's priority areas. The primary thing that we're very excited about is we want to focus on early career scientists. And for the purpose of this award, how we define early career is an individual who has received their PhD within the last 10 years. There can be other team members that are on the project, but not the primary applicant, that do not have to be early career. We just need the PI or the team lead to be that early career scientist. But we definitely expect to have an interdisciplinary program and an interdisciplinary team. So we expect that there will be other team members that may not be early career, but we need that PI to be. Again, as we say, this challenge places priority on fostering those new professional interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary relationships and connections in service to ag innovation. So we also want to see how this this proposed research could address that. And I think the other thing I'd like to call out that might be a little bit different than some of our previous opportunities is that we definitely want the application to include information regarding the research team members and any essential collaborators. And we want to include letters of support from those team members and collaborators. So we do want to have documentation that the team members understand their role and are a part of the proposed opportunity. And that is sometimes a little bit different than some of the RFAs that we have put out. So we just want to highlight that we want to make sure that every applicant that is interested does have a letter of support for those team members and collaborators. We do not necessarily have a format for what that letter of support needs to look like, but just that it is some documentation from the team members. We can proceed to the next slide, please. And so we'll talk a little bit. I won't go into great detail about this because most of the slides that we're sharing now are directly pulled from the RFA. We just want to give an opportunity to highlight the things we want our potential applicants to pay most attention to. So as you can see from the weighting of these criteria, we are highly promoting or looking for those opportunities that sit at the nexus, but that also are novel, innovative, and original. We definitely want to understand the impact and outcome of this proposed research. So we want to understand if this proposal was funded, what is its potential, as John said earlier, to really disrupt or be disruptive or be that next really exciting and innovative idea, and how this might reach or have relevance to a wide range of communities and producers. We will also focus on technical merit. But we recognize that when you are looking at innovative ideas, it may be very early days. You may not have preliminary results. And we are open to seeing proposals that may not necessarily have a body of preliminary results, but it does have some clear technical merit and does seem feasible and achievable within the timeline outlined that Jody shared of 24 months. And then finally, we recognize the importance of partnership. And so we will evaluate whether or not the project presents a compelling and novel partnership opportunity. For example, are you partnering with groups that maybe you have not worked with before or traditionally are not working together in a particular way? That can be very impactful as well. Is the team interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary? And does it leverage diverse backgrounds? And I think that's why in the previous slide, as I mentioned, we really want to understand how the team will work and have those letters of support to indicate how they will work together to bring forth this innovative and impactful outcome. So that is a high level of the review criteria. Again, if you have any additional questions about the review criteria, please put them in the chat as we are monitoring those, and we'll ask them at the end of the call. We'll likely move through the next series of slides quite quickly so that we can make sure that we can have time to answer all the questions, but everything that we're presenting is directly pulled from the RFA. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the project duration is up to 24 months. And Jody mentioned the range of amount award is between $350,000 and $500,000. Matching funds are not required, but they are encouraged. And then we hope to award up to 4, depending on the budget and quality of successful applications. And we plan to make the announcement in fall of this year. Next slide, please. And I believe I'm almost transitioning to my last slide, which I'm always excited about. So I think now I'll turn things over to my colleague, Lauren. And again, I will continue to monitor the chat. And then after Lauren has completed her series of overview, then we'll open things up for questions. So now is a great time to get those questions into the Q&A. And I'll transition to you now, Lauren.
All right. So we are going to dive right into the application itself. So here you will see a list of the application components. This includes a narrated pre-recorded abstract. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Also a project description and approach, a budget justification and budget narrative, key personnel and their roles in the project, and a data management plan. So for more details on any of those components, you can see the full RFA. And so next, this is a little bit more details on how to apply for the program. So all applications must be submitted through FAR's Grants Management Portal. There will be no applications accepted through email or any other format. You have to use FAR's Grants Management System. That portal opened on Tuesday, June 11th, and the deadline to submit those applications is Monday, July 29th at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. So the QR code on your screen will bring you to FAR's website, where you'll see two buttons there. One will say Start a New Application, and the other is Access Saved Applications. And when you click either of those buttons, you will be taken to a screen that looks like this. And if you've applied to FAR before, you can use an existing account, or you can create an account if you have not applied to us in the past. And then once you've created that account, that's where you'll access your saved applications from that point on. If you have any issues at all accessing that portal, you can either click that button at the top right. It says Contact FAR, and that will send an email to our grants management team. And you can also reach them directly at grants@foundationfar.org. And feel free to send an email to them if you have any issues at all. And so once you've accessed that portal, we wanted to give a little bit of guidance on the actual video abstract submission. It should be in the form of a pre-recorded narrated slide presentation, meaning it should be a PowerPoint file, either PPT or PPTX. These are the only file formats that are accepted by the portal for that video abstract, so please just keep that in mind when you're completing your application. And that video abstract should consist of 3 slides with 3 minutes of narration. So that first slide should include a description of the project and the challenges that it addresses. The second slide should propose a disruptive solution to the challenge that you mentioned. And then the third slide should explain the potential impact that your project would have and the proposed solution would have if successful. So with that, here's some additional information about how to stay up to date. There will be a second webinar to answer any frequently asked questions on July 10th. So please keep an eye on FAR's website for more information about that. You can also scan the QR code that you see on your screen. That will take you directly to FAR's website, or you can see on our open opportunities page also has this FAR and USDA Innovation Challenge listed there. You can also follow FAR on X and sign up for our newsletter. It will be providing updates on the challenge throughout the open application period, as well as reminders about that deadline on July 29th. And finally, you can visit USDA's website with the QR code at the bottom there. That will take you to the recording of the official announcement from June 11th, and it will give you more information on the science and research strategy mentioned earlier. So at that point, we will transition to the Q&A. On the screen here, you can see a QR code to the full RFA if you'd like to see it in more detail, if you have any specific questions there. And then I'll pass it back to Dr. Odom.
Thank you so much, Lauren. So thank you so much for the wealth of questions that we've received in the chat. I'm very excited. So I can answer the easiest question first. Someone asked, will there be a recording of this presentation? And the answer is yes, there will be. And for everyone that registered, they will also receive a link. Now, I think my first question might be for John. There's a few questions in the chat around whether or not if you have been awarded a grant previously by USDA, would you still be eligible for this opportunity?
Thanks. And the answer to that one is easy as well. Yes, you would still be eligible for this opportunity. Nothing would preclude you from seeking to apply to FAR to receive some of this funding.
And I think we received a couple of questions in this same space around if this ag innovation qualifies for other funding opportunities, would that be an issue? And so let's say there were other things within NIF or within FAR that this was adjacent to, would we then say that they could not submit to this application?
And I'll of course defer to you, Lakeisha, on that. Given it's FAR funding we're talking about.
Absolutely. So I would say that to answer that question, absolutely not. There is no barrier for you applying to this opportunity. We definitely want to ensure that the research is not being funded duplicatively, but if you can identify a succinct aspect of your research that this funding could apply for, it would be definitely eligible. And then there are a body of questions around whether or not the early career scientist needs to be a US citizen. For FAR applications, no. Also, there are questions around whether they do not have to be a US citizen. And then the other questions were around whether or not the research had to be at a US-based organization, or could the research proposed have a international focus. And I would say that both FAR and USDA are focused on supporting U.S. agriculture. However, we recognize that agriculture research is global. So if you are working in a global context, but the research you're proposing, the innovation you're proposing could be disruptive to U.S. agriculture, and you can prove that in your description, then absolutely. So we do not preclude working with international partners, but we do have to have the proposal be applicable to and benefit U.S. agriculture. So as long as you describe your innovation, your disruptive technology, your proposed impactful research, you can clarify how this would be beneficial to U.S. agriculture, then it is definitely eligible for consideration. There is no issue if you have an international collaboration. That is absolutely allowed. Letters of support from stakeholders can be acceptable in the application as well, as that was another question. The applicant does have to have a PhD to be eligible, the primary applicant. However, members of the team do not. So if there's an amazing like tech person or engineer that may not have a PhD on your team, that's perfectly acceptable. But we do need that PI, the applicant, that would be the person that is receiving the award. They would have to be an early career scientist. And again, I would repeat, that's receiving their PhD within 10 years. Someone asked whether or not we could seek USDA funds to be a match. Unfortunately, FAR is mandated to not accept federal dollars as a match. They do have to be a non-federal match, but again, as match is encouraged and not required. If you do not have that match, or if you do have a match, but it's not from a non-federal source, we can observe, we can be aware of it, but it wouldn't necessarily be something that FAR could match, but match is not required. It is only encouraged. Someone asked about the 10-year timeline. If there's a career gap, is that an issue? No, not an issue for us, as long as that the applicant has received their PhD within 10 years. If there's a gap somewhere in between, like a gap year, someone took a year off to do something and they came back in, that would not preclude them from being eligible for this opportunity. Someone asked if there's a PhD holder, if they would be applicable. They can be an international PhD holder, that is fine. But again, we tie back to US benefit for US agriculture. So as long as that applicant can tie their research or their proposed research back, that is acceptable. Let's see.
And on the timeline for counting the early career scientist or not, there was a question about, is it by year, is it by month? We would count by month, if not day. So it's not just by year, it's looking from the date that PhD was awarded, have 10 years or fewer elapsed since that date.
Yes, and someone else asked, do the team members, they mentioned co-PIs, but we would use the term team members. They do not have to be early career researchers. Would the co-PIs or team members need to submit a 5-page bio sketch or letter of support only? We're asking that they provide a letter of support, but there should be space in the application for them to also upload a bio sketch. Make sure that they're someone did ask this question. I appreciate someone else bringing it up just now. So thinking about how the timing, John or Jody, I'll throw this question to either of you. Folks in the chat want to understand the process. There's a submission and then there's an invite. And what does that process look like? So they submit something on the 29th and then what happens, right? So would either of you like to describe that process while I continue to go through and make sure we cover?
Sure, I'll take a first crack at it, and Jody, please feel free to fill in the gaps. So the proposals are due on July 29th. That is your actual complete proposal, which includes the narrated slide presentation that Lauren spoke about. Those proposals will be reviewed, and in a next phase of the selection process, there will be certain proposals selected to participate in interviews with a review committee, which will ultimately decide and recommend which of the proposals should go forward for funding. So everything that you have should be submitted on the 29th, and then there will be this review process, which winnows out the top proposals and would involve then an additional conversation to identify those which will be selected for funding. Jody, anything else on that?
I'll just add that it's weeks, not months. So I think that might be when we're looking at timelines. I don't know the exact dates that we have on our timeline off the top of my head, and I don't know if they're exact anyway. But we're looking at weeks, not months for review. So I know sometimes it seems like a really long review process for some of our programs. This is not one of them. And so there'll be a relatively quick turnaround in terms of notification if you're going to be asked to come and interview, and then shortly after that interview process. So have your emails up and ready to respond once you've been reached out to. And again, weeks, not months.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. The anticipated award announcement date is this fall. And I see a related question that just came in about, is there a pre-proposal? No. We have a relatively short turnaround here from the announcement earlier this week to the submission date for proposals of July 29th. There is not a pre-proposal phase between now and then. The interview for those projects and teams that are selected to move to that stage of the review process, I think likely would be through video teleconference.
Absolutely. So I saw another interesting question around, can program income generated from a project be used for cost share match? As long as it's not a non-federal, as long as it is a non-federal source, we can definitely explore that as a match. FAR does have matching guidelines. They are listed in the RFA, but as you are completing the application, if you have some specific questions around whether or not something could or could not function as a match, our grants team, they are amazing at answering those questions. And John and I both are resources. Our information will be at the final slide, and we'll share that closer to the end of our time together. So you can always just reach out and say, does this count? Right. But as long as it is non-federal dollars, it could potentially be a match for FAR. And so I would say yes, but maybe if there's some specifics, we can follow up with you later. Someone asked about, if we only have 3 sides, how should we handle references? You will have the opportunity. So there's a video component, but there is also a written component. It's just a truncated component. We're trying also to be innovative in the way that we administer this grant opportunity. So that's why we're testing out the video opportunity as well as a accelerated or a truncated proposal. And so you'll be able to put your references inside the written component that will accompany your PowerPoint, but it is a much shorter application process than we have typically used. Are there size limitations for uploading into the application? I don't know that off the top of my head, but I would say as you're preparing to apply to submit your application, if you have any challenges at all, we know that you can compress and submit as a PDF if you need to. So you can always reach out to us if you're having some issues submitting that PowerPoint. But we'll find out about the size limitation. Thank you, Ed, for that question. And we'll add that to our FAQs on the website because that is a great question. Indirect costs, FAR has a 10% cap on indirect costs. So for anyone that is intrigued about that or asking questions about that, we can answer that. Yes, the recording will definitely be available. And also we will have another webinar on July 10th because we know like the opportunity just opened. So you may just be trying to understand about the RFA, but we figure by July 10th, most people will be either actively applying or in the process of submitting. And so they may have a different type of question at that point in time. So yes, we will record and share this webinar. We're recording it now, but we will also have another webinar to answer any remaining questions. We'll also provide FAQs as we're collecting all of these questions such that we can make sure that they make it into our FAQ list. There is no restriction to allocate funds to the team members or personnel, absolutely not. You will be asked to provide a budget narrative, but not a detailed budget. So we do want to have a high-level overview of the budget over the 2 years. But if you want to subaward or have 10 members and allocate those funds to members of your team, that is absolutely acceptable. You would just describe that in your budget narrative. All aspects of the application that are unspecified by the RFA will use FAR's template and standards, Eugene, yes. And you will see documentation of that in the RFA. And once you log into BBGM, as Lauren described, you'll see all the access to all of those documents. Let's see. See if we have anything else. Particular overhead, 10%. Multiple, there is no requirement of institution nomination. That's a great question, Sean. We do have some opportunities like our new innovators that requires a nomination. This is not that. We don't have to provide that. So multiple institutions, multiple applicants from the same institution can apply, but we would strongly encourage, as we want this project, these successful applicants to be as interdisciplinary as possible, to see if there are ways in which you could collaborate more effectively, right? So if we see a somewhat strong proposal from institution A and another somewhat strong proposal from institution A, we might wonder why they couldn't potentially coordinate and have a much stronger application. But I don't know, Jody or John, do you have any thoughts on how to encourage folks within the same institution to possibly coordinate and submit?
We're encouraging people to work in an interdisciplinary and even transdisciplinary fashion where we're not bringing together just people from different academic disciplines, but actually bringing together teams that represent a wider spectrum of pursuits, from entrepreneurship to farming to academic research to community organizing. So I would encourage, if you are at the same institution, to look for those people who maybe you haven't interacted with in the past, but who may be working in a space that's similar to or even tangentially related to what you're thinking about for this innovation project, and reaching out to them and engaging in conversation and seeing if you might be able to design that stronger, more impactful project that would come by working together across course, disciplinary boundaries, but then even more broadly across those higher level boundaries. So please do look for that within your institution and beyond. I see another question just referencing back to some of the material I shared about USDA partnerships that are focused on innovation, and wondering if there are any open grant opportunities with those. There are not any specific funding opportunities that are currently seeking proposals. I would like to highlight that AIM for Climate, that agriculture innovation mission for climate, looking at international agricultural innovation to address emissions and everything around climate mitigation and adaptation, as well as global hunger. I really encourage anyone here who's interested in food and agriculture innovation to visit their website. It's easy to find. Just search up AIM for Climate, and they are looking for people to sign up and take on innovation sprints. There's no funding associated with those. It is an opportunity to have the food and agriculture innovation efforts that you are currently working on, putting on the ground, recognized as a contribution to this global effort. And so it's a great community to be part of, and we are trying to grow the number of groups that are participating in these innovation sprints right now. So a chance to share a little bit about that. Thanks.
It looks like, Jody, there's a question you wanted to answer live around CEA innovation.
Oh, yes. So there's a question about CEA, is it climate smart? I would say that it's definitely appropriate for the program. Um, and certainly in looking at food security, food nutrition security. And there may be ways to kind of look at increasing energy efficient of the CEA systems and lowering the energy inputs of those systems in terms of innovation to make it more climate smart. While also looking to include that third component, looking at social justice and equity and opportunity as well.
And just to
And
highlight,
then just,
oh no, go ahead, Jody. I'm so sorry.
I just wanted to follow on with John's response to other open opportunities. The USDA NIFA's Agriculture, Food, and Research Initiative Foundational Applied Sciences request for application is currently open. There are a lot of programs that may potentially address some of these components individually within that program. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that request for applications as well.
And just to note, someone had a wonderful question about providing links to smart climate innovation, and John has provided a couple of links in the chat, so I don't want anyone to miss that. Let's see what else. There was a question around whether or not this funding could be used to support postdoc research. And the answer is if you have a proposed project that fits at the intersection of the three priorities, and your early career, you are absolutely applicable to develop a proposal and a team. And if that is part of your postdoctoral research, there's no barrier for us as to you using it for that. So absolutely. Someone had a question around clinical studies to provide more nutrient dense or higher quality food products. Are they outside the scope? And I might throw that to Jody because Jody came up with the amazing case studies. So someone had a question around whether or not clinical studies to provide more nutrient dense or higher quality food products, whether they would be outside of the scope of this RFA.
I don't think they will be outside of the scope as long as they're incorporating the other components. The only, I think, barrier may be funding. Clinical studies, specifically when you're looking at human trials, tend to be very expensive. And so I would just make sure that you're mindful of that. But if there's matching dollars available, it's certainly, I think, appropriate as long as they're incorporating the other two components as well.
All right, let me see, make sure I go down because we got new questions. Is this a new program? That's a great question. It is, and that is why we are designing it in such a unique way. I did see a comment in the chat, and I do understand that having only up to 4 awards, sometimes when you look at the time that you have available to prepare a solid application packet, if you don't have a lot of time and then the dollar amount is not significant, it may be very challenging to work cross multiple departments. We strongly encourage it, however, because we do recognize that what we are really seeking are projects that truly sit at the intersection. And we just find that the way that that will be achieved is likely going to have multiple partners that are not necessarily in one particular department. But we do recognize that as this is our first opportunity, our first program running something in this way, we are also kind of learning as we are growing. And so it is a new program. So there may not be a previous award to search for to avoid redundancy. But I do think that finding projects that sit at the nexus of all 3 of our priority areas, that would be a wonderful program. I don't worry about redundancy as much, I think, as I would for some of our other opportunities that we've run multiple times. So I would say you may not be able to search for previous awards, but definitely look at both of our organizations, what we have funded in the past. And that might be a great way to have a sense of the types of things that FAR typically funds, as well as the types of things that USDA has typically funded. Lauren is adding the information in the chat around the page limit requirements. Lauren can add that. And also, Lauren, I think you were responding to someone's question as far as the size of the PowerPoint. Do you have a response for the size of that? I thought I saw you type in a response.
Yes, that is a 30 megabyte size limitation, and just let us know if you have any issues with that, but that is the current limitation on uploading those PowerPoint files.
And I think someone else asked, but I'm happy to reiterate, can there be multiple PIs? And can those PIs be outside of the US? The answer is the applicant can have a team. The reason we say team versus PI is that we will make the award to one grantee, and that grantee can then subaward, but we would not necessarily make an award to multiple folks. So that's the reason why I'm distinguishing between the PI and the team member. For all intents and purposes, they would serve a similar role, but we would not necessarily be making an award to multiple PIs. We have one PI. And so then, yes, you can have team members that are outside of the US, but again, I reiterate, we want to ensure that whatever proposed innovation or proposed disruptive technology or whatever the exciting innovation you share with us does benefit US agriculture. Let me see if there's any others. Y'all are giving like really great questions. Actually, I love it. So someone wanted to know the difference between the project description and the proposal project description. Maybe John or Jody, would you like to field Erica's question?
Thanks, Lakeisha. So the project description, that longer portion, in that part, we want to hear what you plan to do and what its impact will be. This is the what. The approach, we'd like you to elaborate by telling us how you're going to do it. So product description, what, and what's the likely impact, approach, how you're going to proceed. That's more of the getting into the details of what it would take to achieve your aims and your vision in this project. Jody, any other points on that, or Lakeisha, please also weigh in there.
You were pretty clear. Thank you.
Great.
We also have one question around minority serving institutions and how we define that. We typically follow the same definition that USDA does. So if you are identified as a 1994, 1890, or a Hispanic serving institution, we generally follow those same guidelines. However, Lena, if there's a specific question, you can always shoot a question to John or I, and we can then answer, right? In this form, it's sometimes hard to answer all the questions because some of them are very case by case. So if you don't feel like we adequately captured your answer, please feel free to reach out to us afterwards. And also, again, I reiterate, we'll have another opportunity to answer a lot of these questions, but don't hesitate to send it to us. And I think there was one question that I don't know the answer to, but I might ask my USDA colleagues. They wanted to know about the indirect costs and what would happen for a USDA ARS scientist. And I don't know that I know the answer to that. And if we don't have the answer to that, we will follow up with you. But I wondered if John or Jody, you had an answer to that. And if not, we can easily find an answer and send it to you after the webinar.
I don't have that one at the tip of my tongue. Jody, you might be our best bet for that one.
No, I don't know that one either.
Okay.
Have it. You stumped the panel, you won the award. Let me see. I want to make sure we've answered all of these. Oh, someone is interested in researching the impact of climate change and that effect that it's having on the food system and adverse birth outcomes. Is that something that could fall under this RFA? And I'm going to pivot completely to Jody because she came up with all of the great examples. So I'm going to let her maybe ask that. And if you want to know if I did not capture it correctly, it's also in the webinar chat, Jody.
Okay, I got it. I would say potentially yes, but making sure you stated in multiple countries, so you have to make sure that the outcomes actually do impact U.S. agriculture. And so it can be international, it can be international in scope, it can be appropriate, but the basis of your objectives seems like they may be outside of the U.S. and multiple countries, maybe outside of the U.S., maybe inside the U.S. That's not overly clear from the question. So just make sure that it could be appropriate as long as the overall final outcomes and impacts could potentially impact the U.S. and U.S. agriculture.
And I say this, we are redeemed because our fearless grants director is actually in the webinar and she answered the question about indirect costs in USDA ARS. So no stumping of the panel today. So her response is that you are not allowed to claim IDC if you are from a government institution, USDA or ARS. And since she's already in the room and in the chat, I'd also ask, there was a question that someone asked about program income generated from an innovation project, and could that be used as a cost share match? So for example, revenue from sale of more nutrient dense food products grown in a community garden. So that was another question around whether or not that could be used as match. And I felt, because it was not federal, it could be, but Magda would be the person that would answer that question definitively. They say if it's for a new specific, if it's new and for this specific project, the answer is yes. And again, we'll share all of the information. You'll have our grants email in the RFA. And so we'll also share that, because they are really the best source to answer any of these specific match related, indirect cost related, anything in particular that you have questions about in submission. They are the best resource, and they are very responsive. So I'm looking at the time. We are, first of all, at time, but also I think we answered all our questions. So I again want to transition to the last slide. Thank you all so much for your time, your attention, your thoughtful questions. This means that you really are looking at the RFA and you are very excited to participate, and we really appreciate that. I also want to remind everyone there will be another opportunity for questions, but please don't hesitate to contact either John or myself. If you have any specific questions as you're filling out the application or exploring whether or not this is the right opportunity for your organization, and I will give John or Jody the last word.
Thanks, Lakeisha. Again, just want to reiterate your remarks, thanking everyone for their interest in this opportunity. We need everybody's best efforts and just passion and drive to make the breakthroughs for nutrition security that we're looking for here. So we can't wait to see what innovations you're going to propose. And just a reminder to mark your calendars for July 29th. That is the application deadline once again, and wishing everyone all the best as you form your teams and prepare your proposals. Thank you.